Hello and welcome to FinTech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I have Khe Hy of Latour AI. Latour AI is a company where Khe basically helps people strategize and understand and build artificial intelligence to support their daily workflows and businesses. And with that, here's my interview with Khe.
Great to be here.
Tell us about what it is you do at Latour.
Yes, I started Latour early this year, and really it was an accidental startup or an accidental company where I had been scratching my own itch on learning, immersing, building, reading, interviewing people about AI. And I guess you could call it build in public. I was sharing my findings with my Substack newsletter. And around March of this year, a bunch of my readers, most of which are hedge fund, long, short, buy side firms, stumbled upon it and said, we are so far behind. You are doing stuff that we didn't even know was possible. You're writing about it. Can you come into our firms and teach us how to do it? And so that started the teaching business, the training business, again, mostly aimed at buy-side firms. And the way I describe it's like LLMs 101 and 201, where they're basically using ChatGPT or Copilot, whatever their kind of sanctioned tool of choice, but they're using it as Google 2.0.
Yeah.
Just like a one-off search. And so I spend a good amount of time expanding the possibility of what they can do with a chat-based LLM. I give them a lot of examples ranging from analyses to ghostwriting in your voice to custom GPTs to go through all of the feature sets, which is constantly evolving. And that's usually the end of the training. And what happens after that is they're like, what's LLM 301 look like? And that's where it starts to get funky. Where LM 301 is where, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is where you exceed the frontier of the form factor of chat. You run into a brick wall and you're like, I can't chat my way out of this, whether that means multi-step workflows, whether that means deeper interaction with your data, whether it means some kind of long-term memory. You can no longer do it in ChatGPT or Gemini. And so then there's a fork in the road. You can start using other tools. You can diligence niche vendors. You can start building things yourself. You can use automation tools like Zapier and things like that. And so the field expands, and then that's where the consulting part comes in. They say, okay, we want to go further. We want to bring you into our workflows. We want to show you our strengths. We want to show you our constraints, whether they're compliance constraints or talent constraints, and just help us integrate AI better into our investment process.
It's the difference between using a dedicated tool versus building your own effectively, right? I mean, I've said this before, I am not bullish on the concept of chat as being the final interface, especially given how unbelievably inefficient it actually can be. When you think about a multi-step process or multiple pieces of information where, you have to go and remember that prompt, put that prompt in exactly the same way as last time. There are ways, there are shortcuts, project folders, gems, whatever else it is, but simply like having to make it about text as opposed to clicking a button.
Exactly.
To me, we've been here before. Command line interfaces are not the dominant methodology for how we do things. It's all UX. So I think we are definitely going to be doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where I push them personally. I spend a lot of time in my gateway drug. For background, very quickly, I was a failed computer science major. I was not good at it. I learned C in 1997 at Yale. And then I was in finance for 14 years and the allocator side, fund of hedge funds. So that's where I cut my teeth evaluating hedge funds. I had a 10-year career as an internet entrepreneur, doing a lot of content stuff, thought leadership across a variety of different fields. And that's where I landed back into vibe coding, which we're going to talk about today, through Cursor at the beginning of this year. And my mind was just blown. I'm like, I'm one of those people that has tried to hack solutions to things using complex spreadsheets, using Notion, using Airtable, using Zapier. There's an outcome that I desire with a set of constraints that I'm served with. And I want to get to that outcome as efficiently as possible. Once I discovered vibe coding, I don't really like that phrase, but I call it AI coding, AI-based coding. Once I discovered this system, I was like, oh my God, all bets are off. Let's do this.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. Vibe coding, the term is funny, but I struggle for another one. AI-based coding might be a little bit too intimidating for the nascent people. But yeah, my conversion came with a friend of mine, Brian McLaughlin, who's been on the podcast before. Kind of red tail and a very proficient coder, but he was showing me at a conference what he was doing Cursor. I'm like, yeah, it's a little beyond me, not quite there. He mentioned something like Replit to me, and I was like, oh, okay. So I basically started playing with it, and I was like, maybe I can build this thing for my company as a trial. And I remember it was
1 month.
I can't remember exactly what it was. Or it was like a V1 to try to recreate this reporting tool. And I basically that day had to go run some errands with my family at the mall. And I remember specifically, oh, there's a phone app for this. So next thing I'm like, I'm literally vibe coding on my phone while I'm going between basically giving commands, putting in my back pocket, walking around, taking it out 5 minutes later, give me the next command, moving on. I'm just like, this is wild. This is insane. I'm literally executing on software development while walking around a mall. Like this is,
Yeah.
and I can't
And you
build
don't
it.
know how to code.
And I don't know how to code.
I can't have cursor.
I was
You
just like, I don't know what to do with that output. I really don't. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So basically that was the gateway to so many of my little problems where I've entered the age of the app store with iPhone, right? Where it was like, oh, there's an app for that. It's like, oh, I got this problem. I got this, build this thing. Oh, I can just vibe code that.
Yeah.
Well, like number of times there was one that I spoken about before. There was an expert witness case I was working on, and I had to build, I couldn't use traditional portfolio management software because there were too many gaps in the reporting. That couldn't just upload a bunch of transactions into a system. I had to work around a bunch of limitations. So I was working in these complex spreadsheets for a day and a half. And I realized, oh, I missed this thing. Oh, start over. I'm just like, forget this. Open up Replit. Hour and a half later, I'm like, I finished validating the outputs. I'm like, this is wild. I can't live without this anymore. This is incredible. Yeah, it is crazy. So let's talk about this. So we've talked about AI coded assistants, and I'll be honest, I remember the first time I played with it, I just couldn't get it done. Like it was a great start and then just could not get across the finish line. And now it's to the point where I prototyped a company that's going to be launching shortly. So it goes pretty damn far. All right. Talk to me when you talk to lay people about getting started.
Yeah.
How do you frame this for them?
Yeah. I always start with what's the problem you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll give a very simple one because this is like my base case problem. And I've hacked at this one problem for years. And so I like to keep in touch with people. And I have a system that helps me keep in touch with people. And it's very simple. For every person I meet, I assign a reminder frequency. I would stay in touch with you every 6 months, maybe a near-term prospect every 1 month, one of my best friends, 2 weeks, whatever. And everyone gets these different starting dates, like when they get inputted in the system, and everyone has a different reminder date. So on any day, there's an inbox of people that are rolling into, you need to reach out to them, right? Simple problem. You could do that. So for many years, I did it with Excel, right? Just Excel and filters and so on. Then I'm like, I don't like Excel. It's just doesn't spark joy. Then I had a to-do list app that like made it a little bit better. But this inbox concept was really important to me because I just wanted to go to the inbox and say, who do I need to reach out to today? There's a very important part of this. Worked fine in a to-do list system. But then I was telling people about it. I'm like, hey, I have this system. They're like, oh, you're so good at staying in touch with people. And so that was the problem that I had. I'm like, I want to stay in touch with people. I want each person to have a different frequency. And I want to have this inbox that I check daily that just says, who do you need to get in touch with today? And it would be nice if you could take some notes on them, if there was a snooze button. So you could think of it as a hybrid to-do list meets mini CRM. And so what I tell people, so that was like a little personal problem, low stakes. If it didn't work, who cares? I could roll back to the other version. I'm not trying to become the next Salesforce. I want this for myself. And it's like an entrepreneur, like the Peter Lynch, that's not exactly Peter Lynch, but solve your own problem first.
Solve your own problems first.
Solve your own problems. Once you found that problem, distill it down, find the right vibe coding tool. I think there's a continuum where the most intense would be maybe Claude Code or Codex. And then the least intense might be like Lovable. I've actually never used it. And Replit's probably in the middle.
Yeah.
And so just fine. And what I would say is that the more you go into the easy part, the more you can use your mouse. And the more you go into the harder part, the less you can use your mouse. And so it's like your comfort with using your mouse. Most people like to use their mouse. And so they probably would land where you landed on Replit. Then I tell people, YOLO it. Just say do the biggest, longest brain dump on your thing, kind of the way I just described my problem to you. Try to just anticipate all the questions someone would ask you. Like, is there one screen? Is there two screens? Is it just for you? So on. Just dump it. Your listeners probably use some voice to text, whisper flow or monologue. Just talk into the thing and just say, build it. And then hit enter. We're at the point today where if it's anything that's like simple, managing a few tables or checking things off, it will probably be done in one shot.
Yep.
It might not look the way you want it to look, but the actual functionality will be there.
Well, I actually found that early on, my problem was I got a little too deep in the weeds of telling it what to do. It was like I was too specific about it. And I would get this kind of Frankenstein like interpretation of what I was thinking from a UX standpoint. I actually got away from telling you what to do in terms of an output so much as like I would explain generalities. I need to be able to input the following and I want to see the following outputs. And basically, when I let it go, it found,
Mm,
again, what's this going to do? It's going to find it's going to look at the problem it's trying to solve and find the most highly correlated solution it could find. So it found previous examples of when it had done something similar. And lo and behold, I had some pretty
yeah.
interesting looking UX that I wouldn't have thought through myself.
Nice.
So it
Yeah.
did a pretty good job. I also think that there's something to be said about, I think now, yes, you're right. You can give it a laundry list of what you want to do, and the probability of it getting that stuff accurately or pretty close to it is pretty damn high now.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it was like
Yeah.
you'd have to basically give command, verify it did it, move on to
Yes.
the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And otherwise, it was just too much to check. So I hear where you're coming from, but I also think that I even tell people, just don't overthink it. Just tell them what you're
Yep.
looking for. Tell them what you're looking for and see what
I
happens.
agree. I definitely agree. I agree. And so the next step, I think this is probably the thing that was the most intimidating to me. And I think this is, and I know in general how software works, like very loosely from 25 years ago, but there's code that works on your computer and then there's code that works. And so there's the G word that scares me, GitHub, right? I'm like, what is this thing? It's the scariest thing I've ever seen, GitHub. Even the name is scary.
It used to, it's pretty
And
straightforward.
yeah,
So back up.
but I think that for me, and I found a workflow that worked very well for me was I would, and I had to learn this through iteration, but I would write things in Next.js and I would push them to GitHub and I would connect GitHub to Vercel, which you can think of as a software hosting platform. That workflow works smoothly. So you write your code, the output comes up on your computer, you play around with it, you like how it looks, and then you push it to GitHub, which is basically like saving it to Dropbox. The beautiful thing is you don't even have to know the GitHub commands anymore. You can just say, save this to GitHub, and it will figure out how to do it. Once it's on GitHub, GitHub is you can think of it how you can connect Notion to Slack and like things like that. You can connect GitHub to a million different things. I connect it to Vercel, which is like my preferred hosting service. And then just you push it there and you have a working web app. And it's it looks good. It's fast. You can share the link with people. Obviously, you have to think about security and that kind of stuff, but putting that aside for now. And so that was once I realized that GitHub wasn't scary and there was a place where my art project could live like in the real world. And those steps are literally like, save this to GitHub and connecting your GitHub account to your Vercel account. In this example, there's again, a million different ways to pattern. But that was a really big mental block for even someone as me, as a very good non-technical person. Like the concept of it was so scary. And it wasn't until someone held my hand through like it once. I'm like, wait, that's it? That like you just hit send this to GitHub and like that whole scary monster thing that I created in my head is like that was a huge unlock. And so I really encourage people to just there's an angel gets its wings every time you put your first project from a prompt to something in the real world. It can be a static website to a little to-do list tool, whatever your thing is. But it's such a huge confidence builder. And I can imagine it's a kid that does this first art project or a musician that creates their first track. There's this immense sense of self-satisfaction that you birth this thing from your head into a thing that someone else can look at or use. And it like, anyone listening to this, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you could just try to piece together what we're talking about.
Oh yeah. The thing is, I think what people who don't use it take for granted is that even the people who use it want it to be easy. I more recently got involved into trying to scope out a few things and see if I could do things myself within Google Cloud. And oh boy, was I shocked at how easy it was to set up like organizations and projects and instances and containers stored within certain geographies and access API. It was just like, wow, this is all it takes. Really? It's literally just activating things at this point. So it's pretty wild when you see what can be done at the current level. And here's the other thing too, when people want to play around with this stuff, we already have the sidekick for telling us how to do it. Just ask the LLM, how do I do this with these tools, right? And it will literally paint it out as simply as possible. In fact, I even have a Google gem that I use that it's basically a master prompt. Well, I'll go back and explain that one in a second. That basically I'll explain it like I'm 10. And what it does is anything I tell it, I put in there and ask for instructions on, it runs through a prompt that basically will reply with an answer to explain it to me like I'm 10, specifically 2 parameters. I am 10 and I don't know how to code. And so it's got to be step-by-step in very detail. And lo and behold, if it doesn't go into minute detail. Sometimes it'll get stuck, but I'll just be like, where do you mean at step 5? And then it'll elaborate. And it's all doable. Now the prompting is something else I'm going to give people a little hint on. You can Google this term. This is the secret sauce to making things work faster. Most people, there's different levels of mastery when it comes to how well to prompt an LLM. And there are some who can naturally put in commands by hand and memory that are like akin to like blueprints for how the LLM should operate.
Mhm.
The rest of us aren't like that. So what you can do is copy and paste the terms from a master prompt into a project or to a gem and effectively just have that run every time. And what it does is it'll take your simple command, ask you a couple questions, and build out a massive prompt that will unlock the next level abilities of the LLM. And it's
Yeah.
when you do that, what you're able to actually build on the first go is bonkers.
Can I expand on that? I had never heard the phrase master prompting. And
Really?
I just want to acknowledge that the concept's familiar, but I hadn't heard it called that way. But just so your listeners are like, as you're talking about the Google API and cloud, like you're saying words that I don't even know what they mean. And so I'm getting that feeling that some people might be getting listening to us. They're like, what the heck is Vercel? I don't know what that word
I
is.
never used that myself. My
There,
list will visit tonight, but go on.
there you go. But just so everyone knows that you're always going to have this feeling that there's this bigger, scarier universe that's out there. And just go, like you said, just go ask an LM. What does that mean? What is Vercel? What is an instance of Google Cloud inside of VCP or whatever? And that's the beauty of this. So I would just tell them that this happens all the time, right? We're both teaching each other things that we're unfamiliar with, even in this conversation as the intermediate people. The other thing I want to describe in my process, is it okay if I just expand a bit on how my process
by all
has
means.
shifted? So now what I do is I'll do like a product roadmap document. So there's an idea that I want to build. And so in this case, again, I think it helps to just speak with some examples. So in this case, I do a lot of selling for my consulting services. And so I probably have 2 sales calls a day. And I have the Zoom transcript when they give consent. So I have these transcripts that are and I have a very regimented way of running a sales call. I try to really get people to paint an ideal world for me. I really try to anticipate their objections. I try to think about their pain points and so on. So I have a structured way of running a sales call. And so I just get a transcript over transcript. And these transcripts are gold. Because they're structured, they're always asking the same set of questions. You're getting very different responses. And the transcript is so powerful for marketing copy, running campaigns, for building future products, for product positioning, for naming things, for creating my new website. Like it's a gold mine of information. And anyone who's done marketing and sales knows like when you have the exact language that the customer gave you, that's gold. You don't want to lose that. So the idea was like, I used to do this manually. Again, my own problem. I would go through the call. At the end of the note, I had a Notion document or an Excel document where I would take all the pain points, copy, paste, pain point, Jason, pain point, Brian, outcome, this. And it was so valuable that it was worth doing manually. But then the LLMs came and I'm like, okay, how can I do this with an LLM? First, I did it with a master prompt or a big prompt that was very detailed. I'd copy and paste the prompt, copy and paste the transcript, then copy and paste the results into some other file, right? Now I'm like, okay, I have a process, I have a problem, I have data, and I have a process.
Yeah.
Let's go big on this. So now I just have a separate ChatGPT 5.1 thinking. That's my daily driver for just chatting. 5.1 thinking, and I just explain this problem. I just describe exactly what I described to you. And I say, what I want to build is basically like a dashboard that takes all the themes and takes the words. And so I can say, give me a pain point on price, give me an objection on complexity, and then just have this brain of marketing material. And so I describe this, dump this into ChatGPT 5.1 thinking. And then I ask it, play the role of a product designer, product manager, and interview me to fill in the gaps. And so ChatGPT gave me like 21 questions and it starred like 7. It's like, you don't need to answer all 21, but I really think we'd get the best outcome if you answered the starred 7, which I thought was a great answer.
Yeah.
Gemini actually was very when a new model comes out, I try to double prompt everything to just compare. Gemini was actually quite disappointing. And it only asked 5 follow-up questions that weren't actually that complex and nuanced. So I went with the ChatGPT version. I would have gone with the Gemini version if I thought it was better. And so then I spent about 2 hours answering. These are like detailed questions. It's like an interview almost. So I spent 2 hours answering the question, all voice note. And then at the end, I say, build me a detailed product roadmap that I can input. I use Claude Code to do my AI coding, that I can build into Claude Coding, but I want you to give it in small steps that I can test along the way because I'm not a coder. So I actually struggle with debugging. So it basically takes this 2-hour conversation it had with me, breaks it into 35 steps, very detailed steps. By the way, I say I'm going to feed the steps to an LLM with a testing instruction at the end of each step. Then I go into Claude Code and let's run step 1. let's test it. We test it. Usually it's like standing up the environment, like check to see that this thing got downloaded or this logo shows up on this page. Step 2, set up the database architecture. Go here. Step 3, so on and so forth. That is how I've been running my building now. And it is so much better because like I come in with, and here I knew I was very clear on what the output should look like. You come in with a very clear roadmap. It's clean. You could have probably one shot all 35 steps in Claude Code. I just don't want to do that because that's just like lifting weights just to show you have big muscles, but injuring yourself all the time. Like, what's the point? That's just a vanity metric to say
Exactly.
I one shot at this. And so I want to go through each step. Sometimes if I'm feeling like I have a lot of time, I'll ask it like you, I don't know how to code. Can you explain to me in layperson's language? Like, what did you just do? What's important for me to understand from this step? If I don't have time, I just plow through to the next one. It depends on the day and the mood. And then at the end, we got a real working prototype. And all that can take, I don't know, 2 days, a day. Again, it depends on how much time you want to dedicate.
Yeah. So let's talk about what makes a good product to make with vibe coding, or a good solution to try to build with it, versus a bad one. I have some thoughts on this, but I'll let you kick it off.
Good. Okay. So that's a hard question. I will say that there's some kind of deterministic outcome that like a repeated outcome that you want to do over and over again. And it benefits if you know what those steps to that outcome look like. So that would be one. Another would be you want to, it's not a required, but it's nice to build up some memory so you don't have to like constantly put in new context over time information. So like some kind of data storage element, which is what you lack in the chat world. Like you can store it in projects and gems and custom GPT, but here you can store data. You can store data in databases. You can store database in markdown files. You can save data. You can append to that data. So you're kind of like, I think about it often of like you are like every use case makes it smarter, right? It doesn't have to, but that's a nice feature. Repeatable steps, grabbing from more data sources is, again, it's not a must have, but it's a nice to have where you can feed in. Again, I'm thinking about this often against the limitations of chat, but that's kind of where my
but I'll go into something more fundamental. Okay. So it's something that you're limited by the chat, and what you really need is what you really say to yourself is, I wish there was a software that did X, right? But X has to be something that should basically be relatively confined. It should not be the desire to build the end-all be-all God console of your life. The more complex you're trying to something is, the more likely you're going to fail miserably from various standpoints, right? So, for example, I mentioned previously, expert witness cases where I have to prove the concept of something, or I have to apply one in particular. I have to apply Monte Carlo analysis to a type of insurance policy. I understood all the math on the insurance. I was going to build this entirely huge spreadsheet to do it all. But I thought to myself, what if I just give it the rules? What if I just give it the rules for the policy and said, I need to basically, this one variable every year needs to be a Monte Carlo applied to it. And lo and behold, it nailed it. I was able to then put together something that was more than just a spreadsheet, though I was able to do it faster and I basically have it produce outputs that were customizable and go in different ways. Other ones I've done where basically I've tied into APIs of my CRM to build reports that couldn't be built in the CRM because it was bringing in different data sources and doing different things with them. Because otherwise you can program like a bunch of pre-programmed prompts and hey, I've got a report generator now, that this one report where I take in 3 different pieces of information and consolidate them. Yeah. That's now just a simple drop them in here, execute for the month. Thank you. Anytime you're like, this needs its own piece of software. Yes. Yeah. As long as that own piece of software isn't something that's going to be huge. 2 things. A, if it's mission critical and it's financially, the financial thing that's going to run your business, probably don't want to risk that. Yeah. If it's the more complex software, probably don't want to risk that. And the last piece is you better be able to audit it. Yeah. The first thing I do at the end of building it is, okay, great, this looks nice. Build me an audit console where I need you to export the following. And then I pull the spreadsheet out, spot check everything, build an audit console, whatever else it is. But if you can't validate the outputs and something looks wrong, it's very likely something is wrong.
Great point. I would add one thing or append to one thing that you said is trying to push the ChatGPT as far as you can go to get to that outcome before you start vibe coding it. And so there are a lot of instances where you could have a very good dialed in project with a bunch of good custom instructions where you could probably get 95%, 90% of the way there. And that might be good enough. Or at the minimum, that will expose to you what that 5% that you can't get from the app is. And that's what you would want to build in. And it's way cheaper and way faster to do that.
Yeah, I would say the other thing they could do is on something more complex is quite honestly to view as a prototyping tool, not the thing to build the end state, right? I've seen a number of people where they're like, oh, look, I built this in super complex replacement to my CRM and it does all these 12 different things. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. I'm gonna look at your numbers. Something's broken somewhere. It's just something doesn't work. I guarantee you. You just haven't found, where the poop is lying, man. It exists. It exists, right? Don't go playing like that. But, and also to build something in these things, I think you're going to commercialize it as an enterprise software. You're just being foolish at this state. But it's a great place to basically build the concept, to test it out, to get user input on if you think it's or not. If it's doable within the software, it's doable outside. So one company I'm standing up, there's a lot of data extraction from PDFs. Absolutely, it's doable in both instances, right? I was able to prototype the entire UX. I was able to prototype the functionality, the reporting, the logic, all of it within Replit, and able to turn it over to my friend as a dev to basically just get rolling. And he's like, oh, this is great. Like almost all the work is done. Going faster than he ever could imagine just because it's, hey, all the back end stuff, I know what needs to be done, just validated all that. Then it was like, where's all the calculations, boom, that's already sitting in a database. He's working with that. And then turns around and he's, I'll get to work on the UX and you already laid that all out. Just got to copy what you did. So it can go a lot faster because you're able to put your ideas, instead of putting your ideas on paper, you're putting ideas in code.
And I have not pushed the thing to a developer yet. I haven't found the thing that's worth it, worth the effort and money yet. But on top of that, what you have is, because you built that prototype, you have the language to communicate with your developer. I think that's a huge, have you ever tried to communicate with a design firm? If you don't understand design firms, you can't speak their language. And I think there's something really powerful about just being able to speak the language.
I'll always make the joke from Office Space about the guy who had the job where he had to tell the engineers what the clients wanted. And they're like, can't the engineers just talk to them? No. And there is something to be said about, you're absolutely right. It's being able to speak design and functionality language. It's so much easier to show people something that works than it is for them to understand something than it is to describe it. And especially when it comes to, I always get amused when I hear people like criticize software who are not coming from a non-software basis and, oh, they should just be able to do this. And I know that seems easy to you, but what you just explained there is like a $500,000 bill. How is that possible? It's like, because you don't understand what goes into that, right? It's like, until you understand both sides of the equation, you really don't understand what's feasible.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about just getting started. I've had that question more than once where it's like, can you just tell me what to tell the AI to do? It's like, no. Think about anything you want and then ask it. It will tell you if it can do it or not. I like to say the gateway drug to all of vibe coding is effectively something people are familiar with. And you mentioned previously, spreadsheets. If you are going to build something in a spreadsheet, especially if it's going to be touched by other people, because we know how people will script your spreadsheets if you leave them, you're better off building something a little bit more rigid in the form of a software. In which case, if you can explain what the spreadsheet needs to do, you can explain what it is that the software needs to do.
Yep. I think that people forget, like, Excel is, when you use Excel in a dynamic way, you're creating software, right? You're using if statements, you're using VLOOKUPs, like you're looking up data, you're looking up rows, you're smashing together data, you're trying to get an output, whether it's an EPS number or a yes, no Boolean figure. And so you're right. I think Excel is a fantastic starter drug. And so many people have tried to hack a non-Excel problem into Excel, like a to-do list.
You can even throw Python into Excel now. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing is, I will also add, when it gets to the point where Excel is going to become cumbersome, this is one thing you want to consider.
Do you think it's worth talking about how, I think one of the harder parts is what I call the glue in vibe coding. And so, for example, in my little to-do list app, my mini CRM app, I needed a database. So Supabase is the one that I use. And then I needed email reminders. So I used something called resend.io or resend.com.
Yeah, but I think what you're talking about, the glue of bringing all those pieces together, is largely more unknown when you're doing something like Cloud Code. If you're using a Lovable or a Replit, it will either build those databases natively for you, or it will turn around and like integrate with a suggested thing. So
Replit do email reminders?
I haven't tried, but I would just hook up the SendGrid and basically do something to that effect.
Yeah, because I know that Replit just added Stripe testing, which is another kind of daunting glue task. Test you're doing payments and your payments don't work. Like you can't like mess up payments. There's like a threshold there. And So,
mission critical. You're not going to replace Stripe.
yeah. And that brings up another thing, Jason, which I wonder if you have thoughts on. One is probably one thing I didn't realize about vibe coding is like that the building part, like the going from idea to working prototype or working output is actually the easiest part. I have found that the harder part, so I use Claude Code, so the glue part is hard, but the other hard part is like thinking about the debugging and testing the functionality.
Oh, no.
Does this work? Like it looks like it works.
Is it actually doing anything? And no, 100%. And one of the things I found previously was with the extraction tool where I was like, wait a minute, I put in a separate document. Why are you giving me the same response? And then, oh, we hard coded that number. It's like, what? Who told you to hard? Like, it's going to make a number of assumptions that are going to be wrong, right? So you have to be able to audit the output. Otherwise, you're just playing with fire. Like you're just hoping for the best, and that ain't the case. Now, I will say that it has gotten supremely better. I basically give the example of when we were talking earlier about how I was using Replit, and when the newest version of Claude, which powers it in the background, came out, and I gave it a command and went through the plans and approved them. And then the damn thing went on for 2 hours and I was looking like, what's happening? And it was the testing agent, which was new, was now testing all of the inputs and outputs and functionality. And I was like, okay, this is fascinating. And when something was wrong, it would come up, it would basically report it back to the building agent. It would then think through a plan and then execute on that plan. I'm sitting there going, what am I doing here? Right? That's pretty close to it. But yeah, at the end of the day, did it actually come out perfect? No. So it's still needed me to validate and make sure that I wasn't going to end up screwing myself up.
Yeah. And I think it's implicit in what you said, but I think it's worth saying out loud. What I've found is to really think about your edge cases. And I don't know if you felt this, but I actually I don't find that part that fun. I don't know what that says about me. Do you just like the easy dopamine of like watching something go from 0 to 80? Or you don't find it fun because you don't care so much about the output being pristine. And so maybe you're building the wrong thing. So I think a lot about that because obviously you and I work in financial services. The stakes are high. Like you can't make mistakes. If you're going to build something, you better build it so you're sure that it works. Or if you're going to build it, but you're not sure it's going to work and you're not willing to put in the effort to make sure that it works, be careful.
Why are you building in the first place?
Unless you're just trying to be an artist, right? Go build a to-do list app or go build a video game, right? So yeah, I've noticed myself like hovering on, like really leaning into that tension and usually it comes out to is like, you actually don't care that much about the thing you're building. You built a fun project and when it got to the hard stuff, you walked away. But if you build a hard project that you care about, you're going to stick through it. Hard stuff.
And we're all saying I've had to push back on people in the past that come to me with software that they've clearly vibe coded. They have this borderline naive belief in the infallibility of this stuff. And you're playing with fire. You better not for 1 second think that this thing is, you got to assume it's wrong, right? The question is, you don't know how it's wrong. You got to find it, right? And you got to basically prove to yourself that it's right. Now, this comes down to what's your attack vector? What are you looking to do? Are you looking to rebuild the most crucial piece of software you have? You're taking your life in your own hands. But if you are like, hey, I need to build this thing and I can produce some graphs that'll help validate that I can see if it's right or wrong, just based off of the way the calculations work, right? Great. Most professions, just like this one, the reality is they hold you to account and you're going to be held to, if you build the thing, if you build anything, if you use it as a professional, you are liable for it, right? There is no delegation of that duty.
Yeah. Well said.
Before we wrap up, there's 3 questions I'd like to ask everybody to end on a positive note and make you think. First one is, if you had one thing you could change in your company, the industry as a whole, what would it be?
I would, and this is advice for myself, I think that we're looking at AI as a faster horse. And what happens when you like kind of blow up the horse? No, not like violent horse imagery, but you blow up that concept and you look at it from first principles, right? So I feel like so much of the conversations I'm having and I have with myself is how can I make this existing thing faster and cheaper and more cost effective? I should be asking more often, given that I have this new resources, how would I redesign things from scratch? And it's a very hard way to think. And it's very challenging, but I wish more people thought about it that way, myself included.
Yeah, I think I told you this before we started. I'm rethinking all my deliverables from every step of my client process. Because I was trying to boil the ocean thinking of something bigger. And literally just going to tackle them in chain sequence one at a time, building out the data models for that, but also specifically asking the question of, okay, what is the objective of this entire interaction? What are the takeaways? So therefore, what are the inputs? And understanding like input to, if this is the objective output is X, then basically the input has to be Y. What is that experience I want to build over top of it? And now some of that will be self-built. Some of it is already pre-existing software. That's the other thing I didn't say. If you can get a pre-existing software for 35 to 60 bucks a month that does the job and is saving you the time, dear God, please don't try to rebuild that. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Right. So I would encourage everybody to, if you're going to start, instead of getting overwhelmed by everything, just think of your process. Look at one part of what it is you do and map that out in detail. And then the solutions will start to come forward for how you're going to rebuild that. Second question. What's been the biggest challenge in your company to where it is today?
I think that an over-reliance on chat. I think people believe that this is the final form factor. They're very stubborn. I think it ties to that first question that's like the horse that they're familiar with, and they're just trying to squeeze all the juice out of this current horse.
Yeah.
And I think that I and you, like why I love this conversation is it feels like we're so far beyond chat. The analogy that I use is we've got this like entire infrastructure of water pipes. And all we know is we have this sink. It's this beautiful sink that uses all this like underground piping. And you could take this infrastructure, you could build a reservoir, you could build a dam, you could build a golf course, you could irrigate an entire country's crops, you could build a water park. Like, why are we just looking at like the best sink possible?
I think it comes down to the fact that they're just too obsessed with the solution and product and not the actual problem. Because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone gives a damn if they use AI to solve a solution or not. What they care about is they have a job to be done, right? When I open my phone and I hit a button because something has to happen, I want that thing to happen. I don't care if you're using AI in the background or not. The reality is to think that we're all just going to deal with the tyranny of the blank page. I think people don't fail to realize just how many people in this world fail to even know what to type into a Google search box. Right? We're not going to solve that with a smarter Google search box.
Yep.
What keeps you getting out of bed in the morning to keep on fighting the good fight and doing what you're doing?
I'm 46, so I was 21 during .com, and I was too young. I didn't have enough experience. I didn't have enough capital. I didn't have enough relationships. And so I rode the wave, but as a spectator or as a second derivative and not a first derivative of it. Now I'm 46. I have some capital, not a ton. I have a lot of relationships. I have my health. I have more control over my time. And I really believe, and I can see this in you, that this is much more about AI and outcomes. I think it's another vector of human expression. And that's exciting to me. I'm not saying that there's not downsides to this, and there's going to be some really weird second and third order effects at a societal level, at a job level, at a technology level, at an environmental level. There are. But I think that ultimately this is another vector of human expression. And what better way to live a full life than to lean into your own human expression?
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Jason.
So that was Khe Hy of Latour AI. Hopefully we didn't lose too many of you there, but honestly, if you haven't played around with vibe coding, please do. It is going to change your life if you learn how to put your arms around it and embrace it. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or visit your podcast. Until next time, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at jasonpereira.ca.